Hello everyone and welcome to today's SAP Community Call. My name is Julia Rousseau and I'm part of the SAP Community team, and I'm your host during this call. Our topic of the session is how we develop a state-of-the-art SAP portal using UI5 and more. As always, this call is a recorded session, and you will be able to access all replays of previous SAP Community Calls at community.sap.com under the Events tab. Our speaker for the session is Kristian Kraljic, Technical Lead Architect for SAP for Me. In this session, he will elaborate on why to choose UI5 as a leading UI development technology, and he will give a comprehensive overview of modern web technologies, other SAP technologies, as well as other things his team did to utilize from UI5 to ease the development workflow. Now, before I hand over, I would like to make you aware of the Q&A button down below, where you can already raise questions during the call. So please do not choose the chat option to raise the questions. Use the Q&A down below. Afterwards, we'll reserve some time to answer as many questions as we can during this call. So Kristian, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Julia. Good. Also, a very warm welcome from my side then. Hope everyone is doing fine. So as Julia already announced, I would like to talk a little bit about how we did build a state-of-the-art portal on our side. So maybe just to first introduce myself, my name is Kristian Kraljic. I'm both the technical lead architect for the SAP for Me portal, or to a portal maybe some more of you are known about, which is the SAP One Support Launchpad, and I'll be guiding you through the presentation today. Maybe a very quick agenda. So I plan to give you a quick introduction of about what SAP for Me actually is first. Afterwards, I'm going to talk a little bit about the technologies used and how we did optimize it. And last but not least, we planned quite a bunch of time for a Q&A session. So looking forward for all of your questions at the end of the presentation. With that, let's go to a quick introduction. We do actually plan two parts of these, so to speak, technical mini-series. First of all, today, I would like to deep dive a little bit into the front end, which we built for SAP for Me, which is our web portal. And in a second session, I want to focus a little bit more on some of the backend parts we built on a cloud-based infrastructure to facilitate what we do operate on SAP for Me. And please do also expect some further sessions about SAP for Me in future by other colleagues. First of all, what do we do? So we do build and operate SAP for Me. We aim to really provide a state-of-the-art portal, which everyone is keen to be using. And we really had in this project a very high focus on the customer experience for this portal. We really tried this time to not overwhelm with information. We tried to keep it as narrowed down as possible, but still providing you with all the crucial information you need to have a new entry, a new access portal to SAP. And in order to, before I now go into much detail about this, I would like to quickly hand over to our CPO, to our Chief Product Officer of SAP for Me, which is Jürgen Jakowski, explaining you the matter in a little bit of a high-level overview.
SAP for Me aggregates relevant alerts, metrics, and insights from your SAP product portfolio into one single access point. Start your journey at mesap.com, our website that always includes the latest information about SAP for Me. If you log on for the first time, the user onboarding will help you to initially personalize your settings and maximize your SAP for Me experience. The Intelligent Home area is at the heart of SAP for Me. Based on your preferences, it provides functions, metrics, and more, everything tailored to your needs. The intelligent home will evolve over time and will become even much smarter. It will make you aware of certain situations and will proactively guide you to solve it. Coming from your intelligent home, the product detail page contains a variety of context-driven information that give you a quick and comprehensive overview of your product. From there, you can also examine different perspectives like your systems, licenses, orders, or additional information. Everything in one single access point. Now it's your turn. Just visit our website at me.sap.com. Get familiar with SAP for Me, and if you like, give us feedback. We look forward to hearing from you.
Good. So with that in mind, so as said by our CPO, please go visit us at me.sap.com. We are starting off right now. This is a very new entry way towards SAP, but as was mentioned by Jürgen, we will continuously add more content and try to keep it as simple as possible. And with that as an introduction, I don't want to waste any more time and really dig a little bit deeper into the SAP for Me front end before we come to the technical part. And yeah, I wouldn't want you to have to wait until the end of the presentation to start with the fun part. So this is why I used to really want to share with you what I'm going to show to you today, so you get an initial impression about what we are dealing with. So let me share my browser window, and I'm going to show you SAP for Me and what we, so to speak, did with it. Good. So what you see here is a local version of SAP for Me. I started it locally on my PC because I wouldn't rely on the network of my internet provider when I'm doing a presentation, but essentially the same view you will find on tryme.sap.com. So tryme.sap.com is a page where you don't need to log on. On me.sap.com, you need to sign in with your S user first. And as you can see, the UX, so the user experience of SAP for Me, is already quite different to many portals you may be used to from SAP. We really tried to keep the impressions you get when visiting our homepage to a minimum, focusing on the really important aspects, what you want to know about you and your relation with SAP. So as one of the first portals, we, for instance, focused on the products you actually bought from SAP. So you get an overview, what you actually bought, how many licenses, orders, and systems are associated to those bought products. And if you navigate into one product, you get a comprehensive overview about this single product and all the integration there is to it. You will get information on whom to contact at SAP. You will get additional information such as documentation and homepages you can visit. And we are, as said in the introduction, keen on adding more and more information to this topic related pages. And this is one of the key aspects we kept in mind when we started to build SAP for Me, that we want to build it tailored to you and your needs, not having several different experience for different purpose of what you want to interact with us, but really structured by focus areas, or how we call them capability areas, what you would like to do and what you need to do. So this is also facilitated in the Me area, which will change over time and adapt to your needs specifically. Now, enough from an introduction point of view about SAP for Me in general, but more to the technology behind. As you can see, or as you might recognize, this is a so-called Fiori 3 styled application. So the Fiori 3 is the design paradigm we use in order to style our homepage, the color scheme, the layout of the controls, but we tailored it because what we noticed is that actually building a portal, building a website you can visit is unlike really using an application from SAP. So we tailored this Fiori 3 style, which is more tailored towards application, so you can recognize it, but still we are having some unique kinks, so you are really able to use it more as a homepage and less so as an application. The next thing I would like to show you is simply the loading and responsive performance of the application. So I can do a reload, and as you can see, for a SAP UI5 application, the application is really loaded in the matter of seconds. So this was one big part which we also said a website must need to have. I mean, if you are using an application on your PC, you're oftentimes used to maybe having a little loading indicator or waiting for the application to start. But we want to raise the expectation for you of actually going there and having a good performance. The site should load up quickly. It should not block browser threads and stuff like that. So we did quite a considerable amount of optimization in order to achieve that. And as you are going to see in the second half of the presentation, this reached a point where we really reached a sub 1 millisecond boot up time from clear cache. So this was always our goal, that we wanted to, when you access SAP for me, depending on your quality of your line of your internet connection, have a sub 1 second time before the site loads up and shows you the first information. Because as said, we don't consider this to be an application, but really a website you can visit. We are using latest UI5 technology. I will come to that in a second, as well as custom code in order to really facilitate our build and deployment. And I will also come to that in the matter of this presentation. Good, so let me switch back to my slide deck and let's deep dive a little bit into what I just showed and said to you. First of all, SAP UI5 in general. There are a lot of opinions out there on SAP UI5. There is also specifically from SAP the so-called UI5 Con, where SAP UI5 is promoting SAP UI5. But most generally, I likely hear you say, yeah, sure. I mean, you work at SAP, so you have likely been forced to be using SAP UI5, and it was the obvious choice to go then. And I can assure you that actually this was not the case in our project. We had a very fortunate coincidence, which led that we really had basically no constraints. We had no legacy code base. We were essentially able to start from a blank sheet of paper. And when we started SAP for me development 1.5 years ago, we really first started to go into an evaluation phase, evaluating solutions which are already available, like the Fiori Launchpad, for example, but also evaluating other front-end technologies to use, like some you see here, like Vue or React or Angular. We finally settled down to making a proof of concept at that point in time with Vue and UI5, but we then really purposely and not out of a necessity decided to stick and go for UI5. This was simply the best fit for us from a front-end framework, because some of the major pain points we addressed, like as I'm also supporting the SAP One Support Launchpad, there we have been using in the past a pretty old version of the SAP UI5 framework, and UI5 evolved over time quite a lot. And I also put it here on the slide that with the so-called UI5 evolution track, a lot of performance deficits which have been present in the past were removed. SAP UI5 is really become a state-of-the-art front-end framework, and many of the things that we needed was simply already provided by SAP UI5 in contrast to other UI frameworks which we looked at. So some of the main considerations were really stuff like performance, which was not great for SAP UI5 in the past, I have to admit. But especially with UI5 evolution, the development teams here at SAP done a great job. The open source community, who also supported, did a great job. And SAP UI5 is now having an own build tooling, which allows you to really tailor the so-called bootstrap of your UI5 application to something really fitting to your application, which means beforehand you had, for instance, used a library like SAP M, and it came with all the controls and also delivered all the maybe unnecessary controls you don't want to have on your homepage. With the new build tooling, what is being made is really, it is analyzing your code and based on your import and export definitions, determining what's being put into this so-called custom bootstrap, which means if you are not using a certain type of control, the code of the control is not included into the final bootstrap, and thus resulting in a much more optimized experience in the end from a performance point of view. But there were others. Sure, we had the intention to bring this to the Fiori 3 styling, but also other stuff like really a comprehensive library of controls. This was simply not available for any of the other display frameworks without using any third-party extensions, so to speak. And whether these extensions then work or not, or have problems in future, which we maybe can't figure out, were simply factors which factored into the decision of really going and sticking with UI5. And now, 1.5 years later, and maybe I could also give you that impression in my quick demo just now, I think really they delivered on their promise. We have a very responsive website right now without a lot of lag, without a lot of with a lot of overconsumption. The network performance is great. I will show you that in the second half of the meeting. And yeah, all in all, it was a good decision. Second in my list of things I wanted to talk about is open source. Open source was a main factor when we really started the development of SAP for me. You will also see that in the second session I'm going to host, which is more in regards to our backend infrastructure, which we also fully settled on open source. We literally are not using any proprietary code base or anything which is not open source in our development workstream. So essentially everything you see also in the second half of the presentation, which I'm going to show you in regards to the build, in regards to local development, in regards to what you just saw, which we, so to speak, developed on SAP for me, was built on open source stacks. It was built on some of them, some of the frameworks you see on screen. It was built on Node.js. It was built on Open UI5 mainly. Also SAP UI5 or parts of SAP UI5 are meanwhile open source, like the Viz library. It was built on Visual Studio Code used as an IDE. So what I would like to really bring across with this slide is that building a modern day web application, even with technologies from SAP, which was previously always kind of a proprietary thing to build applications with whatever, BSP or WebDynPro, or even back in the days with DynPro. These were technologies you needed an SAP stack to really work. This is not the case any longer. And there are a lot of open source toolings available. And I think one of the major challenges, and I have to agree, this is something which really also takes a considerable amount of time, but is definitely worth it in the end, is to connect the dots. So as mainly all of the newer technologies are built with a pretty similar software stack, all of them can be combined somehow. So you can utilize different components in order to develop. You can utilize different components to test, to build. And I again want to emphasize, this is all free. This is all available in the internet. And as I have written in the previous slides, one, so to speak, major benefit of open source comes with that it's oftentimes really well documented because it's open. Others do review this, so it needs to be well documented in order for the people to be having access to this kind of software. It's often much more well maintained than a proprietary solution you buy, because if there is a bug, the worst thing which can happen is that you maybe need to fix it yourself and put a pull request to GitHub. But in the end, if you really manage to be connecting the dots, you can achieve some really, really amazing results. And I will come to that if so I'm going to have a second demo at the end of the presentation. And I think you are going to understand what I mean with that, which was simply not possible I think 3 or 4 years or maybe even 5 years from now or in the past. There was really not so much and so freely available, and many major companies out there like Google, Facebook, and other big vendors are developing their part in this ecosystem, and also SAP does with SAP UI5 and others. So that's a really great change and a huge help when we started the development of our own component. Before I come really to the final demo, where I'm also going to show you a little bit more of the inside of the front-end framework we built, I just have one very, maybe a little bit more text-heavy slide as my final, I would put it as room for thinking. Some of the key technology enablers, or I would say maybe some of the things which really made it so that we can build a good experience on SAP for me from a development point of view in the front end, were the ones listed here on the slides. So one of the things we did is we fully and freely tailored the open source components I showed you in the previous slide to our needs. It was not like that we relied on having something out of the box where we could really try to make it work. It was really like, okay, what do we want to achieve? We want to achieve a web portal. Which technologies do we need for that? We need something we can tailor our build in. So we use Gulp. We need something to optimize our HTML, JavaScript, and whatever sources, because we actually wanted to deploy these to the internet. So you should get compressed files. There are open source components for that. And then some of the bigger things listed here, like we had, and this is what I will show you in the second part, sometime in future, in a second community call, we had from the beginning, because we wanted to build an internet-facing platform, kind of unique requirements to our backend design, to our backend infrastructure. And thus, we said, yeah, in order to really deliver a good experience and to not block the front-end development, we need to be able to locally mock the data. So if you develop, you will actually not need to always ramp up a backend instance or connect to a live system, which is maybe unavailable or behaves differently from time to time. So we, for instance, settled with an own mock server, utilizing the OData v4 protocol, using an open source component also provided by SAP of building such a mock server. And essentially what you saw in the demo beforehand, the page I locally started, but also try.me, so try-me.sap.com, is using that exact same mock server, providing you with some mock data which you can see on the screen. And the thing which we then do is we can develop the front end and back end parts independently. And at a later point in time, really just replace the mock server by the real deal backend server I'm going to show you next time, and essentially have a working application end to end. And that's also the next thing. We then continued to tailor our local build environment and really added local end-to-end testing capabilities. We added performance testing capabilities. So we can really run the bootstrap, which I was talking about, the optimized bootstrap, also locally, because if you always need to deploy it to cloud, the turnaround time simply reduces your overall development force and takes time. Nobody wants to do that. So really being able to also locally build the bootstrap and really try to experience or try to also tinker with the bootstrap was a huge help in development. Last but not least, NPM and other tools which we use, for instance, in the backend like Gradle, are a great help to really componentizing your developments, which means it's not necessary that you build all what you saw now on SAP for me as a monolith. What we decided to do is really, we had the idea of really having a componentized infrastructure. So essentially every card I showed you in the demo before could be in an own component you could plug into the SAP for me framework, and modern build tooling simply supports this out of the box. There is nothing which hinders you to do so. Two maybe points which I already talked about a lot, so I don't want to hold this conversation up any longer before I go to my next demo, is that we always consider to be building more of a framework than really as an application. And this came with own unique traits, because if you are building actually a framework, you do take care much more about how do you name things, how do you document things, how do you test things. Because if you are building an application, and I guess you built some applications in the past, if you are building it only for you or only in a smaller scale, you go like, I don't need to think about this variable name or this method name. I'm anyways only consuming it in this one class and I'm the only one. But if you always have this mentality in mind of rather building a framework where you can show cards in, you can have dashboards configured and stuff like that, you take much greater care into the quality of your development, but also in the development procedures, the naming, the documentation and stuff like that. So this was a huge thing in order to really provide a great experience. Last but not least, and I think I talked about this already kind of a lot, and this will also be part of my next demo, so I won't go into much detail. We did a lot of performance optimizations. And yeah, you might ask, yeah, but 2 slides ago, you said SAP UI5 is now better when it comes to performance. That's correct. SAP UI5 is now a completely asynchronous framework, but there are still a lot of topics you can dig deep into making performance optimizations to your web applications. And if you ever delivered a web application to or via the internet, you might notice which websites feel slow or take ages to load or simply don't feel intuitive. And a major part are I would say, the last 10% of optimizations. Modern front-end frameworks like Angular, SAP UI5, and Vue come with a very good base performance. But I say the last 10% of optimization, which really goes deep into how many network threads does a browser have, how many files should I, for instance, put my JavaScript in to deliver on the browser in an optimized manner, but also the perceived loading performance. I don't know if you maybe recall, but when I showed you the demo and the page loaded, it showed a small splash screen first. Afterwards, some moving cards were shown. And these are simply all things which contribute to the so-called perceived performance of an application, which means the user will notice that it's loading, But instead of only showing a blank screen for whatever 3 seconds, maybe the user sees in the first second a splash screen, in the second second some moving cards. So the perceived time for that loading for that loading will simply be lower from that point in time. And these were optimizations we did. Bootstrap optimization I already mentioned. So this is something I'm going to show you in my second demo. So let me go ahead, and this time actually sharing my full screen. So I hope that works. Good. So you should see now, so to speak, a little bit of the development setup, how we imagined a developer to work in SAP for me. On the left-hand side, you see the Visual Studio Code. So we are using an open source IDE. So literally anybody can download this. All the plugins we use in there are open source. And on the right-hand side, you see a locally started version of the browser. And as said, all the data you see in here is served actually by our mock server. And one of the first things I would like to show you is the development workflow of some of our developers. And as I've written on the slides, it's like, yeah, but development turnaround, this is nothing my business is interested in or my company is interested in, really. But I have to tell you, they should be, because the easier your development workflows will be, the better and the higher quality the result will be. The turnaround will be quicker. And that's one of the major cost and effort drivers by development teams, to really struggle with the infrastructure, struggle because a backend system is maybe not available and stuff like that. So that's something why we really did invest very hard into the local development capabilities of SAP for me. So we used open source components like, for instance, browser sync. So as I said, we started a local server here. The server which we are starting is actually the open source version of the SAP UI5 server. So SAP UI5 build tooling is providing a UI5 server, which you can plug into any SAP UI5 application, and it will boot it up locally. So we did that. And one of the components, and this is, so to speak, going to the direction of, yeah, we can tinker and combine certain open source technologies. We then said, yeah, now what we want to have is that if we go into our development, like I opened here a less file. So less is, so to speak, an easier CSS equivalent, which allows us to also provide some nested definitions. So one of the things we wanted to put on top is that if you develop, you don't actually need to go to your browser, reload the application to see your changes happening. So I just triggered that, was unnecessary. So this is not what we imagined the development workflow to look like. So what we put on top, and you see this, so to speak, here in the last console message, is an open source component called the browser sync. So browser sync will allow you to essentially automatically reload your browser instances connected to browser sync if you do a change on the coding. So for instance, I'm here now in the CSS file for the SAP for me shell header. So this is the component you see up here in my screen. And I can now go here and put in some kind of a background color, and I will simply go with a nice red. And now you notice, as soon as I hit save, and I will do that very vigorously over so I will not use the shortcut, I will save it, and look on the right side. As soon as I save it, the CSS will reload, and you see that the header immediately adapted the new color. And this is how we imagined the development workflow from the beginning, that a developer, when he starts front-end development, has his IDE open, has his browser window open, and he can immediately see what changes are made to the application in real time without clicking back and forth between development IDE, or even needing to locally build, for example. Second, what I want to show you before we open the session for Q&A is I now, if you noticed, switch browser windows. In my second browser window, what I opened is also a mock server, but this is running on the optimized Bootstrap. And you will see the difference. Now we are getting even into some code quite quickly. So this is how the, so to speak, optimized index HTML of SAP for me is looking like. And if I would open the local version, you see that this is the unminified version, because sure, if we develop on it, it doesn't need to be minimized because you maybe want to debug through some code. But in the optimized version, the CSS, the JavaScript, etc., is all minified, so we deliver the best performance. So what I've opened here in the second tab is really a optimized version, and I just want to prove you my claim. And now bear in mind that I'm also sharing my screen, that I'm connected to whatever kind of server in the US. So I just want to go into the network tab of Chrome, and I will just try to make it a little bit larger for you. But if I'm reloading the page for the one time, we actually invested into a so-called Bootstrap test mode, which will not load any UI5 and stuff from backend, but will really just load up SAP for me and the core framework. And I mean, I cannot reproduce the 1 second right now because of the mentioned network I'm in, but I think even 2 seconds for now all these constraints is kind of a very good point. And you see the whole Bootstrap we use to really start SAP for me, to load all the controls you just saw on the homepage, literally takes only 1.6 megabyte of transfer. And the image is included, all the CSS and JavaScript is included. And as you can see, in total, for displaying this page, merely 40 network requests have been done, and the first DOM content loading time was already after 1 second. So these were parts of the performance optimizations I mentioned beforehand. And it would have been possible, A, without the open source components, and B, without having these local development capabilities. With that, and I think I kept in time. So I would like to thank you, and I would like to hand back to Julia, who will guide us through the Q&A session of this talk.
Thank you very much, Kristian, for your awesome and insightful presentation. Claps. We will open now the Q&A part. So feel free to ask your questions in our Q&A section down below. And I see that we have already 9 questions.
Yes.
But if somebody of you wants to raise a hand, I can unmute you and you can speak loudly if you like. So when we go to our Q&A, I would say let's start from the beginning. The first question would be, user data should not be stored on hyperscaler. How will this be handled?
Yeah, so good question, but I would like to not go into detail on this question right now, because this is more of something I would like to answer you in our second